Hi everyone, and welcome to my next video tutorial, which will be focused on deploying our Django web application for free on Koyeb. So let's get started. Now the first thing, of course, you need to ensure is that you have a Django application which you want to deploy. As you can see, I have one here set up. I also have my static files, I have my Django apps, and I have everything in place that I need. So just keep that in mind. Okay, now what we're going to want to do now is we're going to want to sign up for a Koyeb account, and I'd recommend you do so via your GitHub account. So first of all, let's go ahead and say sign up, and you want to head on over to koyeb.com. I will be sure to attach all of the relevant links in the description below this video so you can access them all there. So we can say sign up. Okay, and we can sign up with GitHub. So make sure that you are currently signed in to your GitHub account. So of course, I will also be sure to attach a video in the description below that teaches you how to set up GitHub and also Git as well. So you can refer to that video if you don't know how to create a GitHub account. So you can just head on over to github.com and then you can just sign up for an account. It's really easy and quite intuitive to do so. But the important thing is to make sure that you are signed in and you're in the dashboard. Right, so we can go ahead and say sign up with GitHub. Okay, and we want to give Koyeb permission to access our GitHub account. And we can scroll down and say authorize Koyeb. It's then going to redirect us to Koyeb. Okay, so let's just give it a moment. Okay, there we go. And we're going to want to follow the setup wizard. So let's go ahead and do just that. Right, okay, so let's get started. So you will have noticed that you will now have an email here, and that email just says that a third-party GitHub application has been added to your account. So just keep in mind here, that's going to pertain to Koyeb. Right. Right, so we need to provide some information. So the organization name here. So I'm just going to keep it very simple here. I'm just going to say lowercase, the test development. Okay, and remember here, it's going to give you a prompt here for the maximum number of characters, that the letter should be lowercase, no white space or anything. So you can give it any name that you wish here. You can call it anything that you want. Say next. All right, then we need to provide some information here. Okay, so I'm going to first of all put in the full name. So say John Doe. Okay, so I'm using Koyeb for. So here you'll have some information as to what you're using it for. So I'm going to say myself. And then we have the role here. So here you need to just provide some information. So I'm just going to keep it rather basic. I'm going to say hobbyist, and then the plan for what we're going to do. Right, in our case, we'll have web and mobile applications, and then the language that we want to use for the project. Okay, that's going to be Python. And then how did we here? Okay, we can of course choose something that you desire. I'm just going to say search engine. Okay, so you just want to add in some information here. After you've done so, you can go down and say next. And there we are. So well done. You successfully set everything up for your Koyeb account. And this is the main dashboard that we need to be on. As you can see, there are various services. We can create a web service, a private service, a worker, and a database service as well. Now, before we go ahead and deploy our application, there's a lot of things that we're going to want to do first, such as set up a production database to get that out of the way as well. Now, we're going to use the free tier on both the web service for our actual website hosting, and for our Postgres database, it will be on the free tier, and I'll show you how you can specifically set that up. All right, so just focus now on signing up for your Koyeb account and registering it and making sure everything is set up, as you can see on my screen as well. Right, so let's continue. Let's go to database, and we want to create a database service. Right, so the engine here, we're going to keep on the default Postgres engine. You can change the region by clicking on this drop down. So it's just going to select a region for you. So you can see here, it will depend on where you are situated. You can of course change that by selecting on the alternative options. Now under the instance here, you want to choose the free tier here. That's very important that you do so. Okay, we're going to have a default role, and you can change the service name as well. That's something that you can also adjust as well. So do keep in mind all of those parameters, and then once you've set all of that up, you can go ahead and create your database. All right, so make sure you've got all of that settled. All right, so let's create our service. I'm going to say create. Okay, so our database service is being created. So just give it some time. Okay, almost there. Okay, and then all the information is going to display it for us, the connection details. So that's going to be quite effective for us. All right, so here we are. So we can now go ahead and see the overview in terms of our database's information. So it's in a healthy state. We can also see the region, the engine, when it was created. And a very useful feature you can see here is the connection details. So you can see it already has configured for us the method of connecting to our Django application. So if you click here on Django, it's going to give us the information that we need to paste in our settings.py file to connect to this database. So you can see it's very efficient in this regard. Now, of course, you can go ahead and click on the I to reveal the password, which we're going to need. Now, don't worry, we are going to set up environment variables in the later part of this video, but we just want to get our database up to scratch first of all. Right, so make sure that you reveal your password for now, and you can click on the copy icon to copy this, and then you want to navigate to your project settings.py files. I'm going to go to my Django application settings.py file, and if we scroll down, you'll see on the default here that we are using an SQLite database as our default database. So for testing and development, that this is what we have been using. And what you want to do is you want to add in this code that we have here for our Postgres database, and we can comment out our SQLite database now, just like that. And you want to make sure that you have this in place here. All right. So here's all the information that we need for our database. So the engine, we're using a Postgres database. We have our database name, our user, the password, and our host, and SSL will be added for our database. Now, for Django applications to make use of Postgres databases, we need to have a Python adapter for it via the psycho-pg package. So that is what we're going to want to install. So we're going to want to install that particular library. So let's go ahead and do just that. So we can navigate to the following page. So we want to install psycho-pg2. So let's go ahead and install this. So the binary version, and you want to go to your terminal, and in your virtual environment, you just want to say pip install psycho-pg2-binary. Make sure you do that. There we are. Now, since we have this database set up here, we want to see if we're connected to it. So we can just go ahead and say python manage.py run server as a simple test. Okay, so usually if it takes some time, that's an indication. So we can see that we have 20 unapplied migrations. So this means that we have successfully been connected to our database instance here in Koyeb. Okay. So something I also want to mention here is we need to now make our migrations, but I just want to mention that we are now working with our production database in Koyeb. So all of the data that you had previously in an SQLite database will not be usable because that is all part of another database. So a common mistake that people make is assuming that the data gets carried on. It doesn't. So everything is going to be from scratch now. I do have a video that I made a while back on how you can load data from a testing database to a production database. I will be sure to add in that video in the description below as well. But in any case, just keep that in mind, all right? So we're going to make our migrations now to our new production database. So we can say Python manage.py migrate, and that's going to push all of the database files and all of the models, etc., to our Koyeb database. Okay, so it's just going to take a moment. So we want to make sure that is all set up. There we go. All right, now we can go ahead and run our server, and we just want to make sure it's working perfectly fine. Okay, there we go. Let's head on back. And let's, for example, head on over to our application. So we can just move around here and we can see it works. Now, for a test to see that this works, we can just go to our admin page. All right, and what you want to do is just create a soup user for your database for now. So I'm going to say Python manage.py create super user. I'm going to create a admin user. Username, I'm going to say Arno-admin. Skip the email, add in a password. Confirm that password. There we go, and let's actually sign in to our Django admin with that user. All right, so now in the Django admin, what we can do is we can go ahead and sign into it. So make sure you add in that username and associated password. Right, so as you can see, I've entered in the necessary details. So let's go ahead and log in. Okay. Now the reason it does take some time is because remember our application hasn't been uploaded to a web service. Okay, so we technically have a production database working on a local application. Once we've deployed everything, it's going to be a normal speed and all good. But let's go to users now, and we should only have one user, and that is our super user Arno-admin. Okay, we're going to test this later again, just for clarity when we actually deploy our application. Okay, let's log out. Go back, and there we go. So we have created our Postgres database in Koyeb, and we've also configured our database settings as well. And we're now using our production database that we are integrating, and we have set that up. All right, perfect. So well done on getting this into place. So we now have that database set up, and we are good to go to continue with the rest of the things that we need to look at. All right, now the next thing that we're going to want to do is install a few additional packages that are important. So we can navigate to PyPI, and we want to install Gunicorn or Gunicorn within our application, and it is essentially a WSGI HTTP service for Unix. And the reason that we need this is because we want to ensure that our Django application can communicate with the Koyeb web servers. And essentially, Gunicorn or Gunicorn will act as the bridge for that connection. So we can go ahead and install that. So we can just stop our server, and you want to say pip install Gunicorn or Gunicorn. Perfect, we can see it's been installed. Next, we want to install white noise. So white noise is essentially going to help us to serve our static files when we deploy our application to Koyeb. So it will allow us to go on ahead and serve it, and also going to serve our behind the scenes static files, including our Django admins, CSS and JavaScript files, including our own custom CSS and JavaScript files as well. So we can go ahead and install that on our application as well. So you can say pip install white noise. Right, perfect. So make sure that you have installed those packages. It's very important that you do so. So make sure that you have that installed. Right, now the next thing that we want to do is we want to prepare for deployment, and this is going to include a lot of phases. The first thing that we need to do is to prepare our static files production so that can be served in a production-based environment. Then we want to create a requirements.txt file. Then we want to finally go on ahead and configure our environment variables. And in between, we're also going to do a few tweaks by setting debug to false, adjusting our allowed host settings, and so forth. Right, so first of all, let's prepare our static files for production. Now, the first thing that we're going to want to do is define our static root directory. So this is where Koyeb is going to go on ahead and set up our static files directory, which is going to house all of our static files, including the behind the scenes Django admin files, including our custom CSS files as well that we have defined, and our JavaScript files. And that's going to be all collected in a static root directory. Now, what you want to do is head on over to your settings.py file, and you want to go to your static definition. So here we have static URL, and I also have here static files _jars, which is pointing to my base directory, which is pointing at a static directory here, which is in my base directory called static. And here I am linking Django to my custom files here that I have used for my application. And this is very important for routing the static files correctly when you are using them for your application. So you want to make sure that you have the static files _jars in place here and the static URL. So you want to make sure you have these settings here, first of all. Now, the next thing that we're going to want to do is define static root. This is very important. Now, what I always like to do is make use of the OS module here, because you can utilize the OS module to configure environment variables and also set your static root directory as well. So what we can do, and I prefer to do this at the top of the file, is we can go ahead and say import OS. So we want to utilize that module. And we can go back to our static definitions. And now we can define static root. Okay, so we can say static _root equals, and we can say OS, that module we imported, .pass.join, and in parentheses we can say base _dir, comma, and then name our directory where all of our static files will be within. So I'm going to call this static files. And essentially what's going to happen is Koyeb is going to create this static files folder in our base directory, and this is going to be the root for all of our static files, including our custom static files and the behind the scenes default static files as well, will be all within that particular location. Okay, so it's very important that you have that in place. So Koyeb will run python-manage.py collect static for us, so we don't need to worry about that. Now, the part that we do need to worry about is going to ensure that our static files don't get cached. So if we don't have the proper caching backend in place here, which white noise helps us take care of, what can happen is you can deploy your static files fine as is, just with the static root here. But the issue that will occur eventually is after a random amount of times, your browser will cache the static files. So when you make an update to your static files, so let's say your CSS or JavaScript files, the change may not be immediately there. So your browser may be showing the old static files until it caches the newer static files. So that's why we need to integrate white noise here to help us serve our static files efficiently. So we do have a documentation guide assisting us, which I will also share in the description of this video, on how you can use white noise with Django. Now, what we need to do first of all is enable white noise. We already went ahead and installed the package because that was a part of one of the important packages we needed to install. So what you're going to want to do is add in the white noise middleware. And this should be after the Django security middleware in our middleware list. So I'm going to copy the following here. So whitenoise.middleware.whitenoise middleware. And we can go to that location. And here we are. So here's security. So it should be placed right after it right there. So make sure you've added that in as follows. Right. The next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add in the caching support here. So this is essentially going to ensure that our static files have unique names and that they are constantly how can I say, that they are constantly compressed, and so that we don't have any issues with the caching, and it forces our web browser to always load the latest or the newest version of our static files. Okay, now I will explain this a bit more near the end of the video because it isn't a caching and compression video here, but that's just the gist of it for now. But we need to add this in here, and the important part here is the manifest static file storage here. So that will ensure that our files are cached correctly and that our browser always retrieves the latest version when we are updating our static files. So we can go ahead and copy that. And I'm going to put it where my static files definitions are just for clarity. And there we have it. Just remove that comment. All right, so we have that in place as well. All right, so that's how we can configure our static files correctly. So make sure you have all of the following in place. I will zoom out here so you can see. So you need to make sure you have this in place. And I'd also recommend that you don't turn on your server because we are preparing everything for a production-based environment. Great, so we've got that in place. All right, now the next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go on ahead and create a requirements.txt file, and this will house all of the packages for our application. So what we can do is head on to our command prompt and we can say pip freeze greater than requirements.txt. It should indent on a new line. And there we go. So in our base directory, we need to make sure we have a requirements.txt file with our packages. Now I have a few custom ones here for my own application, but I'll tell you the essential ones that you will need. You will need to make sure that you have Gunicorn, that you have PsychoPG2 binary, and that you have white noise, and of course that you have a Django. The rest are extras, of course, that pertain to Django itself or to your own application, but make sure that you have the Gunicorn one, PsychoPG2 binary, white noise, and a Django version here. Very important that you have that in your requirements.txt file. All right, great, so we've got that done. Now, we need to set up all the various settings. So let's go to our settings.py file, and the settings that I mean will include the following. Right, so debug. We need to set that to false. In the meantime, allowed host, we're going to set that to star, which is all. The reason for this is because we don't know the domain name that will be generated for our web service on Koyeb. We are going to, however, replace the allowed host setting here with the domain name that we get generated from Koyeb as soon as we've deployed it. So we're going to deal with that momentarily, so don't worry about that. So make sure you've got that in place. All right, now for security, we want to now configure environment variables to secure our sensitive data. Okay, so there are many ways you can do it, okay, and if you, of course, are an experienced developer, you, of course, will have your own way of managing environment variables. I have my preferred way. This is just an example of how you can do it. So since I've imported the OS module to configure our static root directory here, I'm also going to use it to make use of the environ.get method so that I can configure the environment variables for production. So what I always like to do is I just like to go ahead and copy my values, my environment variable and the associated values in a file locally on my machine. Okay, so I have the secret key. And what I'm going to do then is remove said value. And the secret key is going to be equals to os.environ.get, and the environment variable will be called secret_key. So this is what I'm going to define in Koyeb, and Koyeb then will grab the value I define associated with this environment variable and substitute it for the value and just plug it in to secret key. All right, more on that later on. All right, so we've configured the secret key. Now we have our database, which is very important. Okay, so I'm going to go from name to host. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to have name, and we can go ahead and just add that there. And we can just remove that comma. We have the user. Okay, we have the password. and we have the host. Right, there we go. So we have that set. Okay, and I'm just going to change the names here. So we have name, user, password, and host. So I'm just going to switch all of this out here and say os.environ.get, and in here I'm going to put in name. Okay, and we're going to have the same sort of structure, and I'm just going to make sure it mirrors what we have here. And we can just remove that. And here we'll have user. We'll have password. Here we'll have host. And there we go. So make sure that you save this in a secure place, and we have it here as we should. All right, so our environment variables. Perfect. Okay, great. So we've got that set up. So we've now secured all of our sensitive data. If you have more sensitive information, make sure you set up the environment variables for them, as I've just shown you just now. So make sure you've got that in place. Right, so we've got that set up, and we've got debugged false, allowed host to star for now. Our information is secure. Great. All right, so there we have it. So that is how you can get everything into place to prepare for deployment. So preparing your static files and ensuring your packages are in your requirements.txt file, setting up the debug and allowed host settings, and most importantly, configuring your environment variables. So perfect, well done. Now the next thing we'll do is we're going to download and install Git. So this is very important because we want to push our files to a private GitHub repository, and we need to do so by utilizing Git. All right, so that's the next thing we're going to do. Right, so let's continue. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is we want to go to git-scm.com, and I will be sure to attach the link in the description of this video for you. And if you scroll down, it's going to show the latest release for you. Now, if you are on a macOS device, this web page is quite intuitive. So it's going to say download for macOS if you're using a macOS device. If you're using Windows, it will say download for Windows. So you can just choose the option that is given to you. So I'm going to say download for Windows. Okay, and in our case, we're going to say 64-bit Git for Windows setup. Okay, it's just going to download Git for us. Okay. All right. And of course, what we can go ahead and do is we can go ahead and click on that download. Okay, so your screen may dim. You just want to say yes to the message. And then it's going to bring up for you the setup wizard. And let's go through it. So we can just say next, next. Okay, I'm just going to say yes, was it over? It exists for me. Okay, I'm going to say next. Okay, next. Right, you can just keep on going. And next. And what's important here, you want to make sure that the credential helper is on for Git Credential Manager, very important. So make sure that that is set on by default in the radio button. Okay, and we can say install. So it's going to take a moment here to install Git. So all we're going to want to do now is just be a bit patient, and then we can continue after that has been installed. Okay, so we just want to go ahead and wait for that to be installed. And then once it has been, we can continue from there. Right, so welcome. So as we can see now, we have completed the Git setup wizard here. And we can just uncheck view release notes, and we can launch Git bash. So this is where we're going to add in the necessary commands to push our application to GitHub with Git. So we can go ahead and say finish, and that will launch Git bash for us. So here's the terminal, and here we go. So all I'm going to do now is just adjust the sizing. All right, so now we have it. All right, perfect. So well done. We've got that into place. So we've now gone ahead and downloaded and installed Git. Right, now the next thing we want to do is we want to essentially go on ahead and push our application to GitHub with Git. Now, the first thing that we're going to want to do is head on over to our GitHub dashboard here. We want to create a repository. So I'm going to say create repository. And this is where our source code will be defined within. Let's give our repository a name. I'll call it dev. Description, I'll call this sample application. Make sure you set it to private. We want to add a README file, and we can say create repository. Right, there we have it. So we now have our repository defined. Now this is where our code base is going to be. This is where our application will be within this repository. So let's go ahead now and push this application of ours to GitHub here via Git, and we're going to do so with git bash. Now let's go ahead and define our project structure. So I'm going to minimize this here. Right, okay, so if we take a look at our location in the git bash terminal, we want to go to our desktop first of all, so right here. So to do so, you can say cd, which means change directory, and you want to say desktop. So now we are on our desktop. Now, in my case, my folder is called project CRM, and I'm going to say cd project-crm. Okay, so I'm now on my desktop in Project CRM, and if I were to open up this folder, okay, you can see here I have CRM and my virtual environment. Now CRM here, if I open that up, is essentially my Django project. Okay, so I want to cd one more time into this folder here. So for everyone, it's going to be different. You just want to drop down into the correct location. So now I'm going to say cd crm and say enter, and we can say clear now, and we can see that pass here. So that's my case. So if I look in Visual Studio Code, I am now currently in CRM right here, and I now have access to all these files in my base directory as follows. So for everyone, it's going to be different. It will just depend on your own case. All right, so now let's go ahead and add in the necessary commands that we need for getting all this into place. All right, first we want to initialize a Git repository, so we can just say git init. All right, there we go. Then we want to add our files, so we're going to say git add space dot. Okay, perfect. So we've got that in place. Then we want to commit our files, so let me just say clear, and we're going to say git commit -m for message, and here I'm just going to say first commit. Okay, there we go. Say clear. All right, and then the next thing that we're going to want to do is switch our branch to the main branch. So here we're on master. Let's go to main. So we're going to say git branch -m main. Right, and then I want to add in the origin. So this is where I'm going to push my files to which repository. So to do so, we can say git remote add origin. And you just want to copy that URL, okay, of your repository, and that's going to be your username followed by the repository name. And you can just head on back and right click and paste that in. And you just want to make a slight adjustment, and at the end just say .git and enter. There we have it. Now what we want to do is we want to go on ahead and push all of our code. So to do so, we're just going to say git push, but we are going to have an adjustment to make sure we don't have issues. So you want to say git push -u origin main -- force. You want to go ahead and add in the following. So you just want to be patient here. So it's going to prompt up the credentials manager. So we just need to be a little bit patient, and there it is. All right, and we want to sign in with our browser. We're currently logged into GitHub. Now you can sign in with a code too, with a token. So let's just say sign in with your browser. Okay, it's going to authorize it. And we want to say authorize Git ecosystem. Just refresh. Okay, that's fine. Right, let's go back. And there we can see it's been pushed. So sometimes it doesn't always show a page after it's done. So do keep that in mind. But we can see it's been pushed, and that's good. Now let's just refresh the repository, and we can see our files are there. So don't be alarmed if it doesn't show any sort of success message. Sometimes it doesn't do that. Right, so we have our files here in place, and we're good to go. Perfect. So there we have it. That's how we can push our application to GitHub with Git. All right, perfect. All right, so let's head on back to Koyeb, and we can go to our overview, and we can see already have our database here operational, and we are good to go. All right, now we want to actually deploy our application so that we can actually access it. So let's go ahead and continue with all of that. Right, so we're going to deploy to Koyeb now, and we're going to create a new service, which will be a web service for this. So let's say create service. And now it will be a web service, and we're going to connect and build and deploy our code from our GitHub repository. Okay, and you're going to want to make sure that you install the GitHub app here. So you can click on that, and you want to install and authorize Koyeb. You can say for all repositories or select repository and then choose your repository. It really depends on what you want to do. I would always recommend choosing select repository here. And I'm going to go ahead and select it like such. Right. So that's the repository where our code base is currently situated within. And we can say install and authorize. Okay, so it's just going to take a moment. Okay, and you can see it picks it up there. Okay, we can click on that. All right, so after you've clicked on that, you can go ahead and scroll down, and you can see here we'll have some information on what we want to do. Now, of course, you can always go back a step by clicking on the line here, and that will take you back here. But if you want to proceed, you just click on your repository. That will take you to step 2. Right, now, as you can see, by default, we're using the free tier here, which has been selected. You can change the region as you so desire. Actually, yeah, we can change it to what is available, and you can see if you want to have more resources, you can select that, but you'll have a fee that you need to pay. But we can see the free tier is selected for us by default. If it isn't, you can just go ahead and select that. Right, let's say next. Right, now this part is very important, so make sure you don't rush on this because there are a few things we need to do. So we've got a web service that we're going to utilize. Our source is from our GitHub username in our previously created repository on the main branch. Under build pack, we want to click on the drop down menu. We're going to use a build pack here, and that's going to detect our project's language, install the dependencies, and package the environment into a runnable image. Now, we need to use a run command to run Gunicorn or Gunicorn. So you want to select the override option, and here by the run command, you want to go ahead and add in the following command, which will be Gunicorn. And then to be safe here, you want to go to your Django project, go to your settings.py file, and you want to look for WSGI application, and you just want to see what is the first 2 phases here. So I have crm.wsgi, and you want to copy that, and you want to go ahead and paste that in just next to Gunicorn. And this is the run command to essentially run the build pack as Gunicorn for us. Very important that you have that in place. Great, so we've got that configured. So now we can go ahead and undrop that or drop it. Okay, so if we click on that again, we can see it's been saved. Great, now the environment variables. Okay, so we want to add in the names here. So we have secret key. Okay, and the value. Now with the value, you don't add in the quotes as well. You enter in the value raw here within the quote. So here I'm just going to copy that and paste that in. And we want to add in the rest here, right? So we have name, user, password, and host. Now, just to give you some more information, as I mentioned here, so whatever you defined here, okay, is essentially going to be what is going to be defined here at the end of the day. Okay, but to make it easier for you, I have just left it the same name as what we've defined here, for example, in the database settings for your ease of use. You can go ahead and change, of course, the names here, but just to make it easier, we're just going to use what is set here for us. Okay, so we just want to define that. So the name here that we defined will be name. And in quotes, another, we'll have the user. Okay, then we'll have the password. To make sure that you have the password as well. And the host. Okay, so make sure you've got the environment variable set, so we can see here that whatever is defined here is essentially what we are calling here. Okay, so you can change this like I mentioned. Okay, just make sure that you have the correct values that are associated with what you've defined. So just something I wanted to mention on that. Great, so you've got that defined here. And we can see we've got those 5 variables. We're using a free instance. We've got the region defined, fixed scaling, no volume, also exposed, service name dev. All right, so we've got that all set up. So make sure that you've got everything defined and ready to go. Okay, so after you defined everything, you can scroll down and say deploy. All right, so the deployment has been queued. All right, and we can see if we scroll down the build phase. So let's see, so it's analyzing everything. And we can see everything occurring here. Now it's in the build phase. Okay, so this is really quick. So it's installing the Python version, and you can see it's installing all the packages from our requirements.txt file. It's now running everything. It's now launching it. Okay, and that's because we have that Goonicorn run command in place. You can see it went ahead and ran automatically Python manage.py collect static for us, and it collected all those static files into a workspace known as static files for us. And we can see that, okay, it's been set up. The build has been completed. Now it is deploying it, deploying our application for us. And the instance being created. So as you can see, it's very fast. Usually with these deployment tutorials, I usually need to pause them in this phase because it does take time, but it is relatively quick, I must say. So yeah, that's just something I did want to mention. So now it's just going to allocate all of the necessary resources for this application. And in the meantime, if you scroll up here, you can see it's also defined a public URL for you here, which you can go ahead and access. Now, this is what we're going to add in the domain of this URL to our allowed host settings in due course, so we can ensure that that is configured so we don't have we're not allowing everything from all the hosts. All right, so we can see the instance is starting here. The instance is in the healthy state, and it's currently just loading for us. And there we go, we can see it has been deployed. Now, in some cases, what I do advise people is to just wait a few minutes after you see everything completed here before you access URL. Sometimes you do need to wait, but of course I'm going to take a bit of a gamble here and I'm going to try directly. But I would recommend you just wait for a few moments because sometimes it doesn't always load just yet. But anyway, let's right click on this public URL and open the link in a new tab. And there we go, there's our application hosted. So there you have it. That's how you can deploy your Django web app on Koyeb for free. And we can just navigate around. And the static files. So I mentioned I was going to mention a bit more on that. So if you right click, for example, on your application, go to the page source. If I zoom in, you can see the static files here have dot and a hex code here, .css, for example. Now, this is what I meant when I was referring earlier to the static files and caching. So every time you make a change to your static files, okay, it's going to generate a new hex onto said file, and this will ensure, like I mentioned before, that your browser will always serve us with the latest static files that we are always running. So that is the benefit here that we have. Okay, and what we can do as a good test here is we can go ahead and test this application. But before we do that, what I want us to do before we do that is just to change the allowed host to the new domain name here that we acquired. Right, so the good thing here about Koyeb here is you can see the service is ready. It will automatically pick up any changes that are made to your GitHub repository with your code base. So it's a good test here actually. And what I'm going to do for that test here is I'm just going to manually do this in GitHub itself. You can do it locally on your application and push with Git, but I'm just going to do it here. So we can go to CRM, settings.py, and let's just edit this file here. Allowed hosts here. Okay, we have that. Let's remove that. And we can go ahead and copy this URL, paste that in, and you just want to remove the HTTPS schema with the / and the slashes at the end, and you just want to add in this domain name here. Okay, so we'll be able to access it via this here. Okay, all right, very important. And then you can just go ahead and commit those changes, commit them. There we go. Let's go back to Koyeb. And you can see there that there's a deployment that's queued. So it's already picked that up that there was a change there. So now to scroll down, and it's going to go through the build and the deployment phase. I'm going to wait until both of these are done. And then after they are done, we can go ahead and continue and access our application again just to see that it's all working fine. All right. All right, so welcome back. So we can see our service is ready. Everything's in the healthy stages. And let's head on back here, and I'm just going to copy that, remove that, add in that. I'm just going to add in the domain name now, remove the HTTPS schema, and let's just press enter as a test. And there we have it. All right, so we can see that is working perfectly as it should. All right, so that's a lot safer. Now let's go to the admin. So I'm going to say /admin. Now we can also see those static files are also collected, and we're good to go there. And we're just going to do some testing now. So let's go ahead and sign in with that soup user that we created earlier in the video. Right, so let's log in. And you'll notice now that it will be a lot faster since we have gone on ahead and ensured that we have set up everything for our application. It may take a few moments to be a bit faster as everything is collating. Right, so there we have it. Now, of course, with the speed as well, if you upgrade to another database, okay, with more resources and another web server, then of course the speed will be a lot faster. So I did notice here that it's a little bit slower, but that's perfectly fine. Let's go to user model. And then we can see, okay, there's that user. So we can see that is working. Now I'm just going to test my application. You may have your own application, but I just want to see that all the requests are working fine. So I'm going to say test 101 user. Let's just say just one. Password. And create. Okay, there we go. Sign in. Let's see if that works as well. Okay. And there we have it. All right, so we can see that is working nicely. Let's sign out. And there we go. All right, so there you have it. That is how we can deploy our Django web app to Koyeb for free. And that's how we can go ahead and set that up into place. All right, guys, so that is it for this video. The last thing I want to show you is how you can delete your resources. So let's go ahead and do just that. Now, another thing for those that want to look at the domain names, you can see here, there is a section on domains here where you can read a little bit more about domain names and such for those that want some more information on such. Right, okay, so let's go ahead and navigate to settings. And if we scroll down, we can go ahead and see our uses, and you can deactivate your organization and delete your organization as well. So those are options that are available to you. So that's just something I wanted to go over with you quickly. Right, so if we go to our overview, we can see we have two services here. So we have our database. We can click on the three dots here, and you can go ahead and say delete app. So we can say delete app, and you can call this database. Say delete app. Okay, so that's going to be deleted. Okay, then we have our web service here. So you can see it's deleting all the services within our database. Let's delete the service here. So we can say delete app. And the name here, okay. Okay, you can just copy that, Smiling Katerina. And that's also being deleted. All right, so that's how you can also delete your resources as well. So it's going to delete all of those services within our web service and also our database. Okay. So we also want to delete that. Now, after that has been deleted, what we actually want to do is we want to see if we can access our website still. That's just a bit of a test that we want to check to make sure that we can't access it. So it's very important that we go ahead and do that. So in the meantime, let's see if this still runs. It should fail. And there we go. Okay, so that shouldn't work. Great. Okay. All right, guys. So that's it for this video tutorial. That's how you can go ahead and deploy a Django web app to Koyeb for free. And as always, thank you for the support, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.